Why did no one notice the quiet young specialist walking behind the shooters that day? Maybe because no one expected greatness to come from her. The heat shimmered above Redstone Ridge like a mirage, bending light distorting distance, making the impossible shot at 2,500 meters seem almost like a trick of the eyes. One by one, America's finest snipers had stepped up, fired, and missed. Generals leaned forward in their seats. Journalists whispered. Technicians shook their heads. The Titan XLR-25, the pride of the weapons program, was supposed to make the shot achievable. But physics wasn't cooperating. Specialist Maya Collins moved among them with quiet precision, handing out water bottles, adjusting target markers ignored like background noise. Her uniform hung a little loose on her frame, boots scuffed from range work. She didn't stand out. That was by design. She'd spent years perfecting the art of being unseen. But as Master Sergeant Dawson missed clean with 20 years of experience behind him, something shifted inside her. Her fingers twitched at her side. Her eyes followed the wind. She wasn't supposed to step forward, not today, and yet. When the third shooter failed, the Titan rifle was set aside for maintenance, the murmurs growing. Maya approached Captain Reynolds with quiet determination. "Sir, permission to attempt the shot." The reaction was instant, laughter, sharp and dismissive. Colonel Davidson didn't even hide his smirk. "That rifle weighs more than you do, specialist. Go back to moving targets." She didn't flinch. "Sir, I've been observing the wind patterns. I believe I can make the adjustment." More laughter. It rolled through the officers like a wave. This little logistics specialist thinks she can do what elite marksmen can't. "Let her try," Davidson said finally, voice dripping with condescension. "Might be educational." As she approached the firing line, something inside Maya hardened. She'd carried rifles heavier than this one before. She'd trained on ridges harsher than this range. She shouldered the Titan with practiced ease, surprising a few in the crowd who were watching closely. $10 says she flinches on the trigger," someone whispered. She blocked it all out. The bleachers, the heat, the scorn. Her mind traveled far from Redstone Ridge to a clearing in Montana, the scent of pine and damp earth, her grandfather's voice in her ear. "Listen to what the wind tells you, Maya. It's always honest." Her breathing slowed. Her pulse synced with the rhythm of the gusts. She made 3 rapid scope adjustments none of the previous shooters had even considered. Then she squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder, then silence, 5 seconds of absolute stillness. From the target area, center hit, perfect. The range didn't cheer, it froze. General Porter slowly lowered his binoculars, disbelief carved into his features. Colonel Davidson's face flushed. "Confirm that," he snapped. "Confirmed, sir. Perfect center mass at 2,500 meters." Every eye turned toward Maya. She didn't smile, didn't bask. She simply set the rifle down and resumed parade rest, face unreadable, eyes calm. The same quiet intensity that had made soldiers uncomfortable since the day she enlisted. "Who exactly is this specialist?" General Porter asked quietly. Colonel Davidson's jaw tightened. "Someone who just got very, very lucky, sir." "Luck doesn't make that shot," Porter murmured. "Find out everything about Specialist Collins, everything." She felt their stares on her back as she walked away. She had stepped out of the shadows, and there was no going back. Yeah. 3 days later, the cafeteria buzzed like a stirred hive. Wherever Maya walked, conversations paused. People who'd never noticed her before now studied her like a puzzle. Officers who once barked orders without eye contact now watched her with calculation. She kept her head down and methodically worked through her meal until a tray dropped across from hers. "Mind if I join you, Specialist Collins?" Sergeant First Class Harrison, mid-40s, weathered face, sharp eyes, one of the spotters from the demonstration. She straightened slightly. "Of course not, Sergeant." He studied her the way experienced soldiers do, quiet, steady, stripping away surface layers. "That was some shot the other day." "Thank you, sir." "Not looking for thanks." He leaned forward. looking for answers. That windage adjustment you made, that's not something they teach at basic. She hesitated. My grandfather taught me to shoot when I was young. Harrison nodded slowly. He must have been one hell of a marksman. A flash of memory. Her grandfather's calloused hands adjusting her grip. Breathe with the earth, Maya. Feel it before you interrupt it. You know, Harrison continued casually, it reminds me of something I saw in Afghanistan. Korangal Valley, 2011. There was this spotter they called Whisper. Could read wind shifts seconds before they happened. Saved my ass once. Maya's fork paused halfway to her mouth, just for a heartbeat. She recovered quickly, but Harrison noticed. Sounds like a legend, sir, she said carefully. Oh, he was real enough. His gaze didn't waver. Thing is, he disappeared after one mission. Some say he passed his knowledge to someone else before he went. Before she could respond, Colonel Davidson's shadow fell over the table. Harrison, why are you fraternizing with the help? His tone was light, but his eyes were cold. Just discussing marksmanship techniques, sir, Harrison replied evenly. Well, discuss them elsewhere. Specialist Collins has a special test to prepare for. Davidson turned fully to Maya. 1,400 hours, 5 targets, varied distances. Since you're such an exceptional shot, shouldn't be a problem, right? No, sir, she answered. Good, let's see if lightning strikes twice. As Davidson walked away, Harrison watched him with narrowed eyes. He's gunning for you now, Collins. That shot embarrassed him in front of the brass. I was just doing what I thought was right, sir. Harrison's mouth twitched. Sometimes that's the most dangerous thing you can do in the military. Yeah. At precisely 1400, she reported to the range. A crowd had gathered, word traveled fast. 5 targets, 800 to 2200 meters. 2 minutes. Prove it wasn't a fluke. She settled behind the rifle. The first 3 shots were clean, center hits that made even skeptics murmur. The 4th target came just as a gust kicked up. Dust danced. Maya paused, recalculating. Losing your nerve, Davidson called out. She fired, it hit, but several inches off center. There we go, Davidson said loudly. Pressure gets to everyone eventually. She ignored him. Final target adjustment shot, dead center. 4 out of 5, whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez. That's still incredible. In combat, Davidson announced, voice carrying, almost perfect gets people killed. 1 miss means failure, specialist. Remember that. She stood at attention, face impassive. But those watching closely saw something in her eyes, not defeat, calculation. Yeah. Later that evening, Harrison found her in the armory, cleaning rifles with methodical precision. You deliberately missed that 4th shot, he said without preamble. She looked up sharply. Sir. You hesitated longer than necessary, made it look harder than it was. He leaned against the doorframe. Question is, why would someone like you do that? I don't know what you're talking about, sir. I think you do. His gaze sharpened. Someone who doesn't want too much attention might do that, someone hiding something. She continued cleaning, movements precise. Everyone misses sometimes, Sergeant. True enough, he straightened. Just so you know, Davidson's ordered a full background check. He's determined to find something. For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed her face. Thank you for the warning, sir. One more thing, Harrison added. The Titan's recoil pattern, you compensated perfectly your first try, almost like you fired it before. She said nothing. That rifle's only been at 3 test sites in the country, Harrison said softly. Curious, isn't it? When he left, her hands stilled on the rifle. She'd known this day might come. She just hadn't expected it so soon. Yeah. Across base, Colonel Davidson slammed his hand on a personnel desk. This doesn't make sense. Specialist Collins has 18 months of service, logistics, no sniper training. Paperwork in order, Major Wilson replied. Dig deeper. Nobody picks up shooting skills like that in logistics. Meanwhile, Maya sat alone on a bench overlooking the artillery range, the thunder of howitzers echoing her thoughts. Harrison appeared with 2 coffees. "My father was stationed at Fort Bragg," he said. "82nd Airborne, taught me to shoot when I was 10. "Sounds like a good father," she said softly. "He was," he turned to her. "Your file says you grew up in foster care, no family." "Records can be incomplete, sir." "Yes, they can." He studied her face. "I remember a mission in 2011. Spotter named Whisper. Predicted an ambush through wind patterns. Had a tattoo, Orion's belt, on his forearm." Maya's hand instinctively brushed her wrist. She caught herself, too late. "They're watching you now, Collins," Harrison warned. "Davidson has friends in high places. If there's anything you need to tell me, now's the time." Before she could respond, the radio crackled. "Specialist Collins, report to Range Charlie immediately. Unscheduled qualification test. Colonel's orders." Harrison's face darkened. "That's not standard procedure." "I'll be fine, sir." "Be careful. Davidson is setting you up to fail." She squared her shoulders against the coming storm. And somewhere deep inside, memories long buried began to stir. Why was the sky darkening when she arrived at Range Charlie, as if the weather itself understood what was coming? Heavy clouds rolled across the ridge, carried by a shifting wind that whistled low through the range. It wasn't a scheduled test. Everyone knew it, and that alone made it dangerous. Colonel Davidson stood waiting under a temporary canopy, flanked by officers and technicians. Beside him rested an unfamiliar rifle mounted on a bipod, experimental by the look of it. Rain threatened at the horizon. Conditions were deteriorating by the minute. And Maya understood instantly. This wasn't about evaluation. This was about breaking her. "Specialist Collins," Davidson called out with artificial warmth. "Perfect timing. We're testing new equipment under adverse weather conditions. Since you're our resident miracle shooter, you're up." Her boots crunched on gravel as she approached the firing line. The air felt charged, heavy, like it did before lightning struck. She examined the rifle quickly. Something was wrong. The scope alignment was slightly off. Not by accident. A deliberate miscalibration, subtle enough to evade casual inspection, catastrophic at long range. General Porter appeared at the edge of the canopy, umbrella in hand, his presence unexpected. "What's going on here, Davidson?" "Just a standard adverse conditions test, sir," Davidson replied smoothly. Porter glanced at the storm rolling in. "This isn't authorized." "With respect, sir," Davidson countered, "combat doesn't wait for perfect conditions." Porter's gaze shifted to Maya, who remained silent, methodically adjusting the unfamiliar weapon. He hesitated, then nodded. "Carry on. I'll observe." The first target was set at 1,800 meters. Wind gusted across the range, unpredictable, erratic. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Memories came unbidden, her father's hands guiding hers during a rainstorm, his voice calm. "Weather isn't your enemy, Maya. It's information. Learn to read it." She opened her eyes, adjusted once, twice, then fired. The report echoed across the ridge. A heartbeat later, clang, center mass. A low murmur spread among the officers. Davidson's jaw tightened. "Lucky shot," he said flatly. "Next target, 2,100 meters, right quadrant." 4 more targets followed. 4 more center hits. The rain began to fall harder, visibility dropping to near zero. Yet with each trigger pull, her movements grew calmer, more precise, as if the storm was speaking a language only she understood. When the final target fell, Porter lowered his binoculars slowly. "Impressive shooting, specialist," he said. His eyes lingered on her as though searching for something familiar. "Reminds me of someone I served with years ago. Captain James Westbrook, call sign Whisper. Finest spotter I ever knew." Maya's expression didn't change, but her heartbeat kicked. "His daughter would be about your age now," Porter continued softly. Before she could respond, Davidson interrupted sharply. "General, we should get inside before the storm worsens." As they walked off the range, an aide slipped Davidson a folder. He opened it, scanned quickly, then looked up at Maya with a new, colder intensity. "Well, well," he muttered, "it seems we have a mystery on our hands."
Yeah.
The envelope arrived under her door that night. Plain, unmarked. Inside was a single photograph, a team of rangers in Afghanistan. Back row, a tall man with intense eyes. On his forearm, the tattoo of Orion's belt, her father, Whisper. And beneath the photo, a note scrawled in simple handwriting, "They know. Prepare yourself." Maya stared at the image long into the night. The mask she'd built over years, the name change, the quiet postings, the deliberate invisibility, it was cracking.
Yeah.
By morning, word had spread across Fort Redstone. Davidson had arranged a special public demonstration. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. He wanted to expose her. Half the base gathered at the main range. Officers, enlisted, even civilian contractors. "This isn't standard procedure," Harrison murmured as he joined her near the staging area. "He's gunning for you." "I know, sir," Maya replied quietly. Davidson strutted across the range with the confidence of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. "Ladies and gentlemen, today's demonstration will separate skill from luck. Specialist Collins has shown remarkable, fortunate results in previous tests. Today, we'll see how she performs under more structured conditions." The challenge was brutal, a complex course, moving targets, shifting winds, timed sequences. But it wasn't just difficult, it had been tampered with. Harrison caught her arm as she lifted the designated Titan rifle. "Check everything," he whispered urgently. She did, slowly, methodically. To an untrained eye, she was just prepping. But she was searching for traps. She found them almost immediately. The scope mount misaligned by millimeters, the barrel weighted slightly to disrupt harmonics, enough to ensure consistent misses at distance. In her mind, her father's voice: "If your weapon fails, assume it's been compromised. Adapt. Overcome." Davidson folded his arms, smirk barely concealed. "Ready when you are, specialist." She nodded once. The first target, 800 meters. A gimme shot under normal conditions. She fired. Center mass. Davidson's smirk faltered. The course unfolded like a chess match. Each station more devious than the last. She adjusted subtly each time, compensating for the sabotage with unorthodox techniques that left armorers whispering in disbelief. By the penultimate station, murmurs had grown into open commentary. She shouldn't be hitting anything beyond 1,000 with that scope issue. She's compensating manually. No one does that anymore. The final station, 2,200 meters. Industrial fans roared, creating swirling crosswinds. The rifle's sabotaged state should have made it impossible. Davidson stepped forward, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let me check that scope for you, specialist. Looks misaligned." The crowd went still. It was as good as a confession. She met his gaze evenly. "Thank you, sir, but I've adjusted for it." Something in the way she said it, steady, unshaken, made even the skeptics lean forward. She lay prone. The rain had eased, leaving behind a jittery wind dancing across the range. For a heartbeat, she was 12 again, lying on a cold Montana ridge, her father adjusting her stance after a scope cracked in a storm. "Sometimes they'll stack the deck against you, Maya. That's when you show them what you're made of." She squeezed the trigger. The shot flew clean, center mass at 2,200 meters. The bleachers erupted in gasps and cheers. Even hardened NCOs broke composure. Davidson stood stiff, rage simmering beneath a paper-thin veneer. "Demonstration complete," he snapped. "Dismissed." But he didn't walk away. He watched her, studied her, not as a nuisance anymore, as a threat.
Yeah.
That night his aide hesitated outside his office. "Sir, we found something." "What?" Davidson demanded. The real Maya Collins died in a car accident at age 8. Davidson's eyes narrowed slowly. Then who the hell is she?
The
Across base, Harrison found Maya sitting quietly under the stars near the motor pool. "Impressive work today," he said softly. "Thank you, sir." Sabotaged equipment, public spectacle, and you still embarrassed him. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the distant dark ridgeline. "I served with your father in Afghanistan," Harrison said finally. She froze. "You have his eyes and his wind reading. Don't bother denying it." She exhaled slowly. "If you were me, Sergeant, what would you do?" He studied her for a long moment. "I'd tell the truth, on my own terms, before they dig it up themselves." As he walked away, she saw Davidson standing at the edge of the compound, folder in hand. He wasn't hiding anymore. The hunt had begun. Why did the briefing room feel colder than the storm outside? Maybe because truth, once dragged into the light, changes everything. The long wooden table gleamed under fluorescent lights, challenge coins lining glass cases on the walls. Flags stood motionless in their stands. The air was heavy with military tradition and the weight of judgment. Maya sat alone at the far end of the table, hands folded, spine straight, uniform crisp. She'd faced windstorms, impossible shots, and deliberate sabotage. None of it had made her heart pound like this. The door opened with the heavy rhythm of boots on tile. Colonel Davidson entered first, thick folder in hand like a weapon. General Porter followed, his face unreadable. 2 JAG officers and an intelligence captain filed in behind them. Harrison slipped in last, leaning quietly against the back wall, his expression carefully neutral. Davidson set the folder down with a theatrical thump. "Specialist Maya Collins," he began, his voice dripping with deliberate emphasis on the name. "Except, you're not Maya Collins, are you?" She met his gaze steadily. "Sir." He flipped open the folder, slid a death certificate across the table. "Maya Collins died 17 years ago in a car accident in Billings, Montana. So I'll ask again, who are you?" The silence was absolute. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Maya drew in a slow, measured breath. She'd known this moment would come. She just hadn't expected it so soon. "My name is Maya Westbrook," she said finally, voice firm despite the drum of her pulse. Porter leaned forward slightly. "Westbrook, as in Captain James Westbrook." "Yes, sir, he was my father." The revelation rippled through the room like shockwaves. One of the JAG officers whispered to the other. Davidson's triumphant expression flickered, just for a second, as if he hadn't expected her to face it head-on. Porter's tone softened, almost reverent. "James Whisper Westbrook, one of the finest spotters I ever served with." Davidson pounced on the opening. "She falsified military records, identity fraud." "I used my mother's maiden name," Maya interrupted, calm but resolute. "Collins was legally changed before I enlisted. I didn't falsify records." Davidson leaned forward, voice sharp. "But you concealed your relationship to a decorated operator. Why?" Her composure cracked just slightly. "Because I wanted to earn my place without his shadow." Images flooded her mind uninvited. Arlington Cemetery, age 13, a folded flag in her small hands, whispers swirling around her like smoke. Whisper's daughter, she'll never live up to him. "My father trained me from the time I could hold a rifle," she continued. "After he died, I promised to follow in his footsteps, but when I tried for sniper school, the instructors already had their minds made up. Some thought I was riding his reputation. Others thought a woman couldn't hack it. One even said, 'Whisper's daughter will never be good enough.' So I became Maya Collins. Logistics MOS. Kept my head down. Waited for a chance to prove myself on merit alone." Davidson scoffed. "A touching story, but you deliberately concealed your identity to manipulate the system." "With respect, Colonel," Harrison's voice cut through the tension from the back of the room, "soldiers change names for all kinds of personal reasons. Abuse, privacy, Legacy, that isn't fraud. This is different, Davidson snapped. She concealed a connection to a legendary operator to avoid scrutiny. Porter raised a hand, silencing both, his gaze fixed on Maya. I knew your father. He saved my life in Koringal Valley. I see him in you. Davidson wasn't finished. Sir, regardless of sentiment, regulations were broken. There must be consequences. Porter nodded slowly. Yes, but first confirmation. The intelligence captain tapped his tablet. DNA analysis returned. 99.7% match to Captain James Westbrook. She is his daughter. A quiet exhale escaped her lungs. At least that part was no longer in question. Porter leaned forward. Specialist Westbrook, your father's techniques for reading wind are still taught. Few can master them. That shot you made at 2,500 meters, he would have been proud. Davidson cut in sharply. General, with respect, we're getting sidetracked. There are serious violations here. Porter's expression hardened. You're right, like tampering with military equipment to sabotage a soldier's performance. The room froze. Davidson's face drained of color. Sir, We reviewed range security footage, Porter said, voice cold. The armorer confirmed the scope on Specialist Westbrook's rifle was deliberately misaligned before the demonstration. Davidson's jaw clenched. Porter sat back. We have two issues to resolve: a soldier who withheld family information and a senior officer who attempted to sabotage a subordinate. One seems considerably more serious than the other. The balance in the room shifted like tectonic plates. Davidson, once the hunter, now stood on uncertain ground. However, Porter continued, turning to Maya, rules do exist for a reason. You did withhold information. Therefore, you have a choice. Face disciplinary action or demonstrate your skills, this time with your real name and background known to all. One final test, against our best. She straightened. I'll take the test, sir. Porter nodded. Tomorrow, 800. The most challenging course we can design. Pass and this, he gestured to the damning folder, disappears. Fail and we pursue formal charges. Davidson leaned forward, voice low. This isn't over. Maya met his stare evenly. No, sir, it's just beginning.
The
The hallway outside the briefing room smelled faintly of floor polish and tension. Maya stepped out, lungs burning for air. Behind her, raised voices echoed through the door, Davidson protesting, Porter shutting him down. She didn't stop to listen. She didn't need to. She had less than 24 hours to prepare for the most important test of her life. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down with merciless intensity. Harrison jogged to catch up. How are you holding up? I'm fine, sir. He snorted. Your entire identity just detonated in there and you're fine. She almost smiled. What choice do I have? He nodded toward the range in the distance. Davidson's personally designing tomorrow's course. It'll make everything so far look like basic. I figured as much, she said quietly. They walked together past the PX where soldiers gathered around picnic tables, some falling silent as she passed. Whispers followed. Westbrook, Whisper's daughter. Your father faced something similar, Harrison said suddenly. Maya looked at him, surprised. Back in Koringal Valley, Command thought his wind reading was luck, set up an impossible test to prove him wrong. Harrison chuckled softly. He passed, changed the entire sniper program after that. She hadn't known. Her father had never spoken of it, he'd never bragged. At the crossroads, Harrison stopped. Get some rest. Tomorrow, going to be the longest day of your life. She nodded. Thank you for speaking up in there. He shrugged. Your father would have done the same for me. He started to leave, then paused. And Maya, he really would be proud, not just of your shooting, of your courage. She stood alone in the fading light, throat tight, as the bass around her hummed with whispers of a name she'd hidden for years.
The
Her barracks room was empty when she returned. She sat on the edge of her bunk, hands covering her face. No tears, just a silent exhale that seemed to drain years of careful concealment from her body. From her footlocker, she pulled out a small, weathered notebook, her father's field journal. She'd memorized every page, every wind-patterned sketch, every cryptic note. But tonight, she traced the handwriting like it was a lifeline. "Wish you were here, Dad," she whispered into the quiet. "Tomorrow's the day." The bass outside settled into its nighttime rhythm. But inside her, the storm was only beginning to build. Why was the range silent when she stepped onto it that morning, as if everyone was holding their breath? The wind moved through the grass in restless swirls, banners snapping sharply in the early light. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the air crisp, the sky pale blue. It should have felt clear, clean. Instead, it carried the weight of something monumental, like the moments before history is made. Maya walked toward the firing line flanked by two MPs, not because she was under arrest, but because procedure demanded precision. Behind the barricades, hundreds had gathered, soldiers, officers, civilians, and a cluster of Pentagon officials flown in overnight. Cameras were set up. Rangefinders clicked softly. This wasn't a test anymore. This was a reckoning. General Porter stood near the command tower, hands clasped behind his back, expression grave. Colonel Davidson prowled the staging area like a wolf that had convinced itself it still controlled the hunt. Harrison gave her a small nod from the side, a quiet anchor in the storm. "Specialist Westbrook," Porter called out, deliberately using her real name, letting it carry across the range. "Today's course will test every element of long-range engagement under combat-simulated conditions, moving targets, shifting wind, blind intervals, and timed sequences. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," she answered clearly. "Good." His gaze softened just a fraction. "Show us who you are."
Yeah.
The course layout sprawled like a battlefield. 10 targets, ranging from 800 to 2,600 meters, scattered through varied terrain. Hidden wind towers adjusted speed and direction unpredictably. Some targets were set on rotating arms, others on sleds pulled through gullies. Two were obscured entirely, requiring calculation without direct visual confirmation. It was, without exaggeration, the most complex course Redstone had ever assembled. Davidson's voice rang over the loudspeaker. "Shooter will have 30 minutes. Ammunition is limited. No spotter." No spotter, that was new. In sniper doctrine, spotters were the eyes, the safety net, the second brain. Removing that meant they wanted to see her raw instincts. She settled prone behind the Titan rifle. Her hands moved over the weapon like a pianist warming up before a concert, adjusting cheek weld, fine-tuning the scope, feeling the weight. She blocked out the murmur of the crowd, the click of cameras. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply. For a heartbeat, she was back on a cold Montana ridge. Her father beside her, wind slicing through layers, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "The wind will lie to everyone else. It'll tell you the truth if you listen." She opened her eyes, ready. The first target appeared at 1,000 meters. Moving, crosswind at her left. She adjusted half a mil and squeezed. Clang, first hit. The next two came in quick succession, 1,400 and 1,900 meters. Both fell clean. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone near the bleachers muttered, "She's reading the wind raw, she's not even using the kestrel." At the command tower, Davidson's face twitched. Porter remained impassive, but his hands tightened slightly behind his back. Target 4 popped up, a steel silhouette halfway obscured behind a ridge at 2,300 meters. Wind shifted violently mid-flight, a sudden gust curling downrange. Any conventional shooter would have missed. Maya waited an extra beat, recalibrating mentally. Adjusted. Fired. The spotter cam zoomed in, center mass. Gasps, then silence. The silence of professionals recognizing something rare.
Yeah.
By target 6, Davidson began packing. She'd hit every single one clean. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't showboating. She was methodical, calm, terrifyingly precise. Target 7, 2,600 meters, no visual, Harrison murmured under his breath. This is where it breaks most people. 2 miles of shifting terrain, no clear line of sight, just telemetry data and instinct. Maya closed her eyes again. The world narrowed to the sound of the wind threading through the valley. She felt it pulling right, curling upward in thermals. Her father's voice came like a whisper across years and loss. You don't find the target. You find the wind and the target reveals itself. She dialed adjustments that made the range officers blink. Fired. The delay was long, too long. Then a distant metallic ring, faint but unmistakable. A roar went through the spectators. Soldiers pounded the bleachers. Even some of Davidson's loyalists couldn't help but cheer. Porter's mouth tightened, not in disapproval, but in the way a man fights not to let pride show too soon.
Yeah.
Target 8 appeared low, 1,200 meters darting laterally. She hit it clean. Target 9, 2,000 meters, rotating. She calculated the timing like a mathematician, squeezed, hit dead center on the rotation's apex. One left. Target 10 rose slowly from behind a berm at 2,500 meters, the same impossible distance as her original shot, but this time, the wind wasn't steady. It howled, shifting direction mid-burst, swirling like a living thing. The course designers had made this their final trick. She lay perfectly still, the world narrowing to scope, trigger, and wind. She could feel hundreds of eyes boring into her. Davidson's stare was knives. Porter's was something quieter, expectation. The first gust hit, then the second from a different angle. She didn't panic. She didn't overcorrect. She waited, watched the grass 500 meters out where two currents collided, creating a brief corridor of stillness. Her finger tightened on the trigger in that sliver of time. The rifle barked. The pause seemed endless, then clang. Dead center. The range exploded. Cheers, whistles, shouts. Soldiers surged to their feet. Even the Pentagon officials, normally statues, exchanged looks of genuine awe. Porter allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. "James," he whispered under his breath, "your girl did it." Davidson's face was pale stone.
Yeah.
When it was over, Maya stood before the command tower as results were announced. 10 targets, 10 hits, under conditions that had broken some of the best. General Porter stepped forward. "Specialist Westbrook," he said formally, "you've done more than pass. You've set a new Redstone record, and you've reminded this base what excellence looks like." She stood at attention, trying to keep her breathing steady. The applause rolling over her wasn't about ego. It was about something deeper, years of silence cracking open. Davidson forced himself to step forward, each movement like chewing glass. "Congratulations, Specialist," he said through clenched teeth. "Thank you, sir," she answered evenly.
Yeah.
Hours later, after the crowd dispersed, Maya sat alone at the far edge of the range. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in bruised gold. Harrison approached quietly, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "New record holder," he said softly, handing her a cup. She took it, staring out at the distant targets. "It doesn't feel real." "It is. You earned every inch of it." She hesitated. "You ever feel like proving yourself doesn't change how people see you?" Harrison nodded slowly. "All the time, some people don't want proof, they want control. Davidson lost that today." Maya sipped her coffee. The range was quiet now, peaceful. But beneath that peace she sensed movement, unseen currents shifting. She won today, but Davidson wasn't finished. Somewhere behind him, in shadowed offices and whispered phone calls, wheels were already turning. The wind across the ridge carried the faint scent of rain again. History wasn't finished with her yet. Why did the celebration feel so brief? Maybe because victories on military soil rarely lasted long. The morning after her record-shattering test, Maya walked into the mess hall expecting awkward stares or hushed whispers. Instead, the entire room went silent. Conversations froze. Trays paused midair. Soldiers who'd never spoken her name before now watched her like a living legend stepping into their midst. She moved through the crowd with quiet precision, tray in hand. Some nodded respectfully. A few clapped as she passed, and at the far end a cluster of snipers from the elite recon company rose to their feet. Their captain, broad-shouldered, scar over one eyebrow, gave her a slow, deliberate salute. She returned it. It wasn't arrogance, it was acknowledgement, soldier to soldier. "Mind if I sit?" Harrison asked, appearing at her side with his usual unhurried calm. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Big day," he said, sipping black coffee. "Feels like it was someone else," she admitted. Harrison smirked. "You hit 10 for 10 on the hardest course Redstone's ever built. Half of Washington still talking about it. Trust me, that was you." She gave a small, quiet smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. He noticed. "What's wrong?" "Davidson," she said simply. Harrison leaned back. "Yeah, he's not done. I saw him last night making calls, Pentagon line." She nodded. She felt it too. The way his eyes had lingered as she'd walked off the range, not beaten, calculating.
Yeah.
Later that day, the summons came. Not from Davidson this time, but from General Porter's office. She reported promptly, stepping through the polished oak doors into a space heavy with authority. Porter stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, gaze on the distant hills. "Specialist Westbrook," he said without turning, "you've caused quite a stir."
Sorry.
He finally faced her. "The Pentagon has reviewed yesterday's footage. Word spread fast. They're interested, very interested." "In what way, sir?" "In deploying you," he said simply. "A classified long-range interdiction mission. Overseas, real targets, real consequences." Her heartbeat kicked. "I'm logistics, sir." He smiled faintly. "You were logistics. As of 800 this morning, you've been temporarily reassigned to special activities tasking. If you accept, you'll deploy within 72 hours. She hesitated. The reality of it settled like weight on her chest. This wasn't just about records anymore. This was about stepping into the dangerous world her father had lived and died in. Porter studied her. "This isn't an order, it's a choice. But I'll be honest with you, Westbrook. Soldiers like you don't come around often, and missions like this, they have a way of defining careers." She swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, I accept." His expression softened. "I thought you would."
Yeah.
As she left Porter's office, she almost collided with Davidson in the hallway. His smile was practiced, but his eyes were ice. "Congratulations, specialist," he said smoothly. "Quite the promotion." "Thank you, sir." "You know," he continued, stepping closer, lowering his voice, "some soldiers get elevated too fast. They shine bright, briefly. Then they burn out." She met his gaze evenly. "I'll try not to burn, sir." He leaned in just enough for her to catch the venom beneath the civility. "Careful out there. The higher you climb, the further there is to fall."
Yeah.
Back in the barracks, she sat on her bunk staring at her packed rucksack. 3 uniforms, minimal personal gear, one small keepsake, her father's field journal. She traced the edges of it, feeling the years between them collapse. Harrison knocked softly on the doorframe. "Got a minute?" "Always." He stepped in, holding a small black case. "I heard about the reassignment. Porter filled me in. You're heading out." "Yeah," she said quietly. He placed the case on her bunk. "Open it." Inside lay a custom-modified Titan XLR-25, sleek, balanced, adjusted perfectly for her preferences. "You had this altered?" she asked, running her fingers along the receiver. Harrison nodded. "Balanced for your shooting style, barrel harmonics adjusted, scope locked and zeroed, it's yours now." She exhaled slowly. "Thank you, sir." He gave a rare, genuine smile. You remind me of your father more every day. Just don't try to be him, be you.
Yes,
The flight overseas was quiet. No unit insignia, no manifest. Just a blacked-out C-17, 4 operators from tasking Team Echo and her. They didn't speak much, but their eyes measured her carefully. By the time they landed on a remote airstrip in Eastern Europe, their silence had turned into a quiet, cautious respect. The mission briefing was blunt. A high-value target was moving through mountainous terrain in a convoy, a financier linked to multiple attacks. Local forces couldn't reach him. Drones had limited visibility due to weather. A sniper team would be inserted at high altitude to intercept. She'd be that sniper. The terrain reminded her of Montana, cold, sparse wind that spoke in low, twisting languages. Her team leader, Captain Vega, laid out the plan. We insert at night. 2 clicks from the ridge. You set up overwatch. We confirm target through SIGINT. 1 shot. 1 kill. No second chances. Understood. Yes, sir, she said. Vega studied her. We've all seen the footage. Just remember, this isn't a range. No applause if you hit. No do-overs if you miss. She met his gaze. Understood.
yes,
Insertion night came cold and black. The helicopter dropped them off under cover of storm clouds. They moved in silence through the darkness, boots crunching over frozen ground. She felt the familiar focus settle in, the tunnel vision of a shooter aligning with purpose. They reached the ridge hours before dawn. She set up the rifle in a shallow depression, camouflaged against the terrain. The convoy was expected to appear on the winding road below at first light. As she waited, wind licked across her face, whispering old patterns. Her father's voice was there again, steady as ever. You don't control the wind, you understand it. Time stretched. The SIGINT operator whispered into her earpiece, convoy approaching. 2 SUVs, 1 truck, 3rd vehicle is the target. She locked onto the lead, adjusted, tracked. But something was off. A flicker of movement on a distant slope, too deliberate. Possible overwatch on the opposite ridge, she whispered. Vega responded immediately. Hold position. Do not fire until we have confirmation. The convoy rolled into view. She adjusted again. The wind shifted, sliding down the valley in unpredictable currents. Her finger rested on the trigger. And then a glint of glass. Opposite ridge, another sniper, not theirs. Her breath froze. Counter-sniper, she hissed. Can you take him? Vega asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her body moved before thought, adjusting elevation, calculating in milliseconds, 2 gusts. Range, 1,980 meters. She fired. The enemy sniper went down before he even saw her scope flash. Threat neutralized, she whispered. Take the shot, Vega ordered. She shifted back to the 3rd vehicle, tracked through the crosswind, squeezed. Impact, the target's SUV lurched violently to the side. Mission complete.
yes,
Extraction was clean. But on the flight back, Maya stared at the dark mountains beneath them and felt something strange, not adrenaline, not relief. A quiet, deep certainty. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be. But deep in the Pentagon, as her mission report was encrypted and transmitted, Colonel Davidson stood in a quiet conference room, speaking into a secure line. Yes, he said coldly, she performed exactly as expected, which is why we moved to the next phase. He closed the folder with her name on it. The hunt wasn't over, it was evolving. Why was the air back at Redstone heavier than when she'd left? Victory overseas should have meant celebration, commendations, maybe even a quiet moment of pride. But as Maya stepped off the C-17 onto the tarmac, boots meeting home soil once more, she felt something colder settle over her, not the crisp autumn wind, but the eyes. Watching, measuring, waiting. It started small. A shift in the way soldiers glanced at her as she walked by. Not the respectful awe from before, but something more cautious. Offices whispered with doors slightly ajar. Paperwork she'd signed dozens of times before now came back stamped further review. Her leave request disappeared. Her inbox filled with reassignment memos, all unsigned. Harrison found her outside the motor pool 2 days after she returned. He leaned against a Humvee, arms crossed, expression sharp. "They're moving," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. He tossed her a manila folder. Inside, internal transfer documents, background requests, and one line highlighted in red: Special Oversight Committee, Section 7. "That's Davidson," she said flatly. "Section 7 is Pentagon Intelligence Oversight," Harrison explained. "When they can't shut someone down the normal way, they drown them in scrutiny, background audits, psychological evaluations. If they find anything, they'll use it to sideline you permanently." She closed the folder slowly. "He's not coming at me with sabotage anymore. He's using the system." "Exactly," Harrison said, "and he's good at it."
The
The evaluation summons arrived the next morning. Mandatory psychological assessment. Failure to comply will result in administrative hold. She sat in the sterile waiting room of the base medical wing, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Posters on the wall encouraged soldiers to seek help for PTSD. Across from her, a young private fidgeted nervously. She wasn't nervous. She was calculating. The psychologist, a civilian contractor, greeted her warmly, too warmly. "Specialist Westbrook, thank you for coming in. Please have a seat." The session began innocently, questions about her childhood, her father, her service. But it shifted gradually. The questions probed deeper. "Do you experience intrusive memories? Have you ever concealed emotional distress from superiors? Have you ever disobeyed an order due to personal judgment?" She answered truthfully, calmly, but beneath the civility she sensed the angle. They weren't evaluating her fitness. They were searching for ammunition. When the session ended, she walked out with her jaw tight. In the hallway, Harrison was waiting. "How'd it go?" "They weren't looking for cracks," she said. "They were trying to make some."
the
That afternoon, she was summoned again, this time to a secure conference room she'd never been in before. General Porter was already seated at the head of the table. Davidson stood to his left like a lawyer ready to deliver closing arguments. Two Pentagon officials sat opposite them, faces impassive. "Specialist Westbrook," one of the officials began, "we've reviewed your recent operational performance. Exceptional. However, questions have been raised regarding your background and psychological stability under prolonged classified conditions." Maya sat straighter. "With respect, ma'am, my operational record speaks for itself." Davidson slid a folder across the table. Inside were photocopies, her childhood foster records, name change documents, even old therapist notes from before she enlisted. He dug deep. "This history was concealed during enlistment," Davidson said smoothly. "That raises questions about her transparency." Porter's jaw tightened. "This information has no bearing on her operational capability." "Perhaps not," Davidson countered, "but public perception matters. We cannot risk deploying someone with unresolved personal complexities on missions tied to national security." Unresolved personal complexities. He turned her history into a liability. The Pentagon official tapped her pen. "Specialist, we're not here to punish. But given your unique background, your sudden prominence, and recent operations, the department is recommending reassignment to a non-deployable role pending a full security review." It hit her like a punch. "You're grounding me." "For now," Davidson said, pretending sympathy, "until we can be absolutely sure there are no surprises." Porter's voice was sharp. "This is political, not operational." "Politics is operational at this level," Davidson replied coolly. Maya stood slowly. "With respect, sir, I've done everything asked of me. I've served with honor. If this is about my father, then say so. If it's about fear, then say so. But don't pretend this is about procedure. The Pentagon officials exchanged a glance. Your reassignment order will be processed within 48 hours.
Yes.
Outside, the hallways seemed longer, colder. Soldiers who had cheered for her weeks ago now averted their eyes, not out of shame but out of self-preservation. She wasn't a rising star anymore. She was radioactive. Harrison caught up with her near the barracks. They pulled your deployable status. I know. They're trying to bury you in paperwork until you disappear. She leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. I can handle pressure. I can handle scrutiny. What I can't handle is being erased. Harrison hesitated. There might be a way around this, but it's dangerous. She looked at him sharply. There's a mission, he said quietly. Off the books, blacker than black, no Pentagon oversight. One of my old teams is short a shooter. They're moving against a network that financed the same attacks your father died fighting. If you take it, you'd be gone before the paperwork hits. She studied him carefully. And if I fail? Then Davidson gets what he wants. You vanish, and this whole thing becomes a cautionary tale. She didn't hesitate. When? 48 hours. Meet me at Hangar 12 after midnight if you're in.
Yes.
That night, alone in her barracks room, she opened her father's weathered journal again. Pages smelled faintly of gun, oil, and pine. Scrawled in the margins of one page was something she'd never noticed before. They'll try to break you quietly. Not with bullets, with whispers. Don't let them. Her decision crystallized.
Yes.
Midnight, Hangar 12. The air smelled like jet fuel and secrecy. Harrison was waiting beside a matte black transport plane with a small, tight-lipped team. No insignia, no questions. You're sure about this? He asked. Yes, she replied. Once you step on that plane, there's no going back. She hoisted her gear over her shoulder, the Titan rifle case resting against her leg like an old friend. I already crossed that line a long time ago. The engines roared to life. Back in his office, Davidson stared at an empty reassignment folder, realizing too late she'd slipped through his net. His hand tightened on the phone. Find her, he ordered, and when you do, make sure she doesn't come back. The hunt had gone silent, but it hadn't ended. It had just stepped into the dark. Why did the sky look different at 30,000 feet? Maybe because this flight wasn't logged, this mission wasn't written, and for the first time in years, Maya was stepping outside the reach of every rule that had tried to contain her. The plane hummed low against the night. No cabin lights, just the red glow of tactical lamps washing over faces sharpened by experience. These weren't regular operators. This was a ghost unit, men and women who moved in the spaces between official orders. Harrison sat across from her, strapping down his gear. You sure you're ready for this? Maya checked her rifle case. I've been ready for years. He nodded slowly. This op isn't like the others. No backups, no satellites watching. If something goes wrong, no one's coming. She met his gaze evenly. I'm not expecting anyone to.
Yes.
They landed hours later at a forward staging point in rugged, mountainous terrain, somewhere along the edge of a fractured eastern border zone. No formal base, just a cluster of camouflage tents, one small generator, and a handful of people who didn't ask questions. The mission briefing happened in whispers around a single map laid on a folding table. The target, a high-ranking logistics commander coordinating black market weapons shipments to multiple insurgent factions. He operated out of a fortified estate perched on a rocky plateau, surrounded by winding ridges and shifting winds that made aerial strikes unreliable. His security had already repelled 2 drone reconnaissance attempts. The plan: infiltrate 2 ridges away, establish a long-range overwatch position, and eliminate him during a rare outdoor meeting scheduled for the following night. Maya, Harrison said, pointing to the terrain lines, you'll be here, 2,800 meters. That's beyond anything in the manual, but if anyone can read this wind channel, it's you. She studied the topography. Two ridges converged into a natural funnel. Winds collided and reversed mid-valley, creating chaotic, almost sentient air currents. It was a sniper's nightmare. She nodded once. "I'll make the shot." The team leader, a weathered man known only as Rook, spoke for the first time. "No heroics. You miss, we abort. We don't get second chances out here." She met his stare without flinching. "I don't miss."
The
That night they moved into position under a moon that hung low and pale, like a watchful eye. The trek was brutal, steep inclines, shifting gravel, cold air slicing through layers of gear. Maya carried the Titan on her back, the weight familiar, grounding. Hours before dawn they reached the ridge. The world stretched vast and indifferent around them, valleys swallowed in fog, distant lights flickering like secrets. The estate was a speck of light across the chasm, almost mocking in its distance. She set up her rifle, crawling into a small depression shielded by rocks. Every movement was deliberate, ritualistic. She checked elevation, wind direction, humidity, barometric pressure. The valley whispered different stories every minute, gusts colliding in unpredictable ways. Harrison crouched beside her, scanning through binos. "You're the only one I'd trust with this." She didn't respond. She was already in that space, the silent corridor where fear and thought didn't exist. Just breath, wind, trigger. Morning brought a thin mist and restless wind. The team hunkered down, hidden beneath camouflage netting, waiting for the meeting to begin. Rook's voice crackled over the encrypted comms. "Target convoy approaching the estate. ETA, 20 minutes. Maya adjusted her scope. Through layers of shifting air, the estate came into sharper focus. She could see guards moving along the walls, their patterns disciplined. The commander emerged shortly after, tall, heavy coat, flanked by two lieutenants. They gathered around an outdoor table in the courtyard. "This is it," Harrison murmured. She steadied her breathing. 2,800 meters. Shifting crosswinds. It was beyond official sniper doctrine and exactly where she belonged. The first gust hit from the west. She adjusted. A second, stronger gust followed from the south, colliding mid-valley. She waited. Her father's words came unbidden. "Patience isn't hesitation, Maya. It's precision waiting for its moment." She found the stillness, that brief corridor when opposing winds paused, neither dominant. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The world held its breath. Then impact, center mass. The commander dropped before his guards even realized what had happened. Chaos erupted in the courtyard. Soldiers scrambled for cover. Radios blared in a language carried faintly on the wind. "Target down," she whispered. "Time to move," Rook ordered.
The
The exfiltration was fast, surgical. They broke down the position in under a minute, moving like shadows back into the rocks. But halfway through the retreat, a distant rumble split the night. Helicopters. "Contact," Harrison hissed. "They're sweeping the ridges." Spotlights cut through the darkness like scythes. The team fanned out, moving silently through ravines and gullies. But Maya's pack snagged briefly on a jagged rock, delaying her seconds. The helicopter swept past, then doubled back. A spotlight washed the slope she just crossed. Rook's voice came through the earpiece. "They've got eyes on you. Move." She sprinted low, weaving through scrub and stone. Bullets ripped through the air seconds later, tracer rounds slicing the night. Harrison appeared on her flank, firing short, controlled bursts to distract the pursuing troops. "This way." They dove into a narrow fissure between two boulders as the helicopter hovered overhead. Dust rained down on them. Maya pressed her back against cold stone, breath steady despite the adrenaline surge. Harrison glanced at her. "They're not responding like a normal security team. They knew we'd be here." She frowned. "You think Davidson?" "Who else could feed intel like this?" he muttered. Above them, the chopper's engines roared before pulling away, searching elsewhere. The team regrouped at the secondary exfil point, a dried riverbed where an unmarked truck waited with its engine running. As they climbed in, Rook's eyes locked on Maya. Someone leaked this up, high up. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was already gnawing at the edges of her thoughts.
Yeah.
Back at the forward site, the mood shifted. The mission was a success, surgically flawless, but the ambush lingered like smoke that wouldn't clear. Rook paced, muttering into a scrambled radio line. Harrison cleaned his weapon slowly, jaw tight. Maya sat apart, wiping down the Titan with methodical care, letting her breathing settle. She replayed the spotlight sweeping the ridge, the timing too perfect. It wasn't luck, it was coordination. Her mind went back to Davidson's voice in that corridor weeks ago. The higher you climb, the further there is to fall. This wasn't coincidence, it was a move. She didn't realize Harrison had approached until he crouched next to her. "They'll make it look like you leaked the op," he said quietly. She froze. "Think about it. You bypassed reassignment. You joined a black op off the books. If Davidson's already feeding intel, he's also laying the groundwork to pin it on you." Her hands stilled on the rifle. "Then we get ahead of him." Harrison nodded slowly. "We'll need proof, and if we're right, the leak isn't just Davidson, it's bigger." The wind outside shifted suddenly, rattling the tent flaps. It sounded almost like a warning. Somewhere in Washington, Davidson hung up a secure call. "Yes," he said coolly. "She delivered, and now so will we." The hunt was no longer silent. It was coordinated, and Maya was now more than a target, she was bait. Why did the base feel unfamiliar when she returned, as if the ground itself no longer recognized her? The plane touched down under a quiet sky, but the silence wasn't peace, it was a void before impact. Maya stepped off the transport into a night thick with anticipation. She eliminated a high-value target with a near-impossible shot. Her mission had been flawless, and yet no one was there to greet her. No debrief team, no commendation, no handshake from General Porter. Only waiting military police. "Specialist Westbrook," the lead MP said, voice flat, "you're to come with us." She didn't resist. Her boots echoed through sterile hallways as they escorted her to a secure conference room deep inside Redstone's administrative wing, the same wing where Davidson's office resided. She was seated alone at a metal table under the harsh light of a single overhead bulb, the door locking shut behind her with a sound that carried finality. She knew what this was. The door opened after what felt like an hour. Davidson walked in, immaculate uniform, hands behind his back, face carved into smug restraint. "Quite the trip, Specialist," he began lightly. "You've been busy." She stared straight ahead. "Is there a charge, sir?" "Oh, several," he said, packing slowly. "But let's start with the big one. Unauthorized participation in a covert operation without Pentagon sanction, resulting in a major international incident. Enemy forces knew you were there, Maya. They were ready. Someone leaked the mission, and guess who's being named as the leak?" She didn't flinch. "You." He smiled, small and cold. "You're a clever girl, but not clever enough. There are communications logs, intercepted messages, all conveniently routed through channels tied to your temporary reassignment. It's airtight." Harrison's warning echoed in her mind. "They'll make it look like you leaked the op." Davidson leaned closer. "You've been exceptional, Westbrook, too exceptional. And exceptional people are dangerous when they don't belong to anyone. You could have played the game. You could have stayed in your box. But instead you decided to be a story. And stories can be rewritten." She met his gaze. "You're framing me to cover the real leak." He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. The silence said everything.
Yeah.
The official investigation was swift, precise, and brutally one-sided. Davidson controlled the narrative, feeding selected evidence to the Pentagon Oversight Committee. Her deployment was recast as a reckless stunt. Her heroics were twisted into ego-driven freelancing. The ambush was pinned entirely on her supposed unsecured communications. Witnesses were called. Rook's testimony was classified and sealed. Harrison's objections were noted but ignored. Davidson's version became fact. Porter tried to intervene, but even he was bound by the machinery of politics. One night, after a long session behind closed doors, he found her in the holding room. His face was drawn, weary. "They're coming for you hard, Maya," he said quietly. "Davidson has friends in high places. This isn't about guilt. It's about narrative control." She leaned back in her chair. "What happens to me?" "They'll strip your clearance, reassign you to a dead-end stateside posting, if you're lucky." She studied him. "And if I'm not?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to.
Yeah.
2 nights later, a storm rolled across the base, wind rattling windows, rain beating down like artillery on rooftops. Maya sat in a holding room staring at her father's field journal, the pages creased and worn from years of use. The words he'd written decades earlier whispered louder now. "They'll try to break you quietly. Not with bullets, with whispers." She wasn't going to let whispers bury her. The door clicked open. Harrison slipped in, soaked from the rain. He closed it behind him quietly. "We don't have much time," he said. "What are you doing here?" He placed a small encrypted drive on the table. "Proof. Rook traced the real leak. It wasn't you. It wasn't even Davidson directly. It was a chain, a deliberate handoff through a cutout system. And guess where the first signal originated?" Her pulse quickened. "Where?" "Davidson's secure line. We've got timestamps, encryption keys, and mirrored backups from the forward site. Enough to burn him down." She stared at the drive. "If we turn this over, he'll bury it." Harrison nodded. "Unless we don't give it to them. Unless we give it to someone he can't control."
Yeah.
The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated risk. Harrison contacted Porter quietly, bringing him into the loop. Together, they built a plan to bypass Davidson's network entirely and deliver the evidence directly to the Inspector General's office in D.C., simultaneously leaking sanitized fragments to trusted journalists embedded within defense circles. Davidson sensed something was wrong before they could act. He mobilized his people, loyal officers who owed him favors. Maya was quietly moved to a temporary holding facility on base, a polite euphemism for isolation. Her belongings were seized. The Titan rifle was locked away. She sat in darkness, cuffed to a chair, storm winds battering the building outside. Then the lights went out. The door opened. Harrison stood there, soaked again, face lit by the red glow of emergency lighting. "Time to move," he whispered. They slipped through service corridors like ghosts, avoiding patrols, moving toward the flight line where a transport plane waited under Porter's authority. The evidence was secured. The plan was alive. But as they approached the hangar, Davidson himself appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by 2 MPs. "Going somewhere, specialist," he called out, voice almost amused. Maya stepped forward, rain dripping off her hair, shoulders squared. "You tried to bury me." He tilted his head. "You buried yourself." "You underestimated me," she said softly. The confrontation was quiet, lethal. No raised voices, just 2 wills locked. Davidson turned to his MPs. "Arrest her." Before they could step forward, Porter's voice boomed from behind them. "Stand down." He emerged from the shadows, Inspector General's liaison beside him. "Orders have changed," Porter said coldly. "Colonel Davidson, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. You'll surrender your credentials immediately." Davidson's mask slipped for the first time. "You think this will stop me?" Porter's gaze was iron. "No, but it stops you tonight."
Yeah.
Days later, Maya stood before a closed committee in Washington. Evidence played across screens, encrypted logs, transmission trails, intercepted communications. Piece by piece, the story was rebuilt. Not the one Davidson wrote, but the truth. He was stripped of his command, placed under federal investigation for conspiracy, obstruction, and treasonous activity. His allies scattered. When the session ended, Porter found her in the hallway. "You could have disappeared quietly," he said. "Instead, you fought." She looked out a window at the city below, gray in the morning light. "My father didn't raise me to run." Porter nodded. "You've got a choice now. You can return to your old posting, or we can make something new." She turned to him. "What do you mean?" "The Pentagon wants to build a new program," he said. "One that trains shooters like you, not just for range records, but for real-world precision. Lead it." She was silent for a long moment. "I'll do it."
Yeah.
Months later, at a remote range in the high desert, wind carving across sand and stone, Maya stood beside a line of recruits, men and women who looked at her not with suspicion, but with respect. The Titan rifle rested in her hands. "This isn't about hitting targets," she told them softly. "It's about listening to the wind, to the world, to yourself. That's how you make the impossible possible." She stepped back, watching them line up, eyes sharp, breath steady. A new chapter had begun, not written by whispers, but by her own hand. The wind shifted gently across the range. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts."